I was 16 when my world fell apart. My parents had died in a car accident, and in the span of a single night, my life changed forever. One moment, I was just a normal kid with a loving family, and the next, I was an orphan, left with nothing but a funeral to attend and a sister I thought I could trust. Her name was Emma. She was 24, 8 years older than me, and for as long as I could remember, she had been my protector. When I scraped my knees as a kid, she was the one who cleaned me up. When I struggled with school, she was the one who stayed up late, helping me with my homework. And when our parents fought, as all parents do, she was the one who whispered to me in the dark, telling me everything would be okay. So when the lawyer read our parents' will and announced that everything, our house, their savings, my college fund, was left to Emma, I didn't question it. She was my sister. She would take care of me. That's what I believed. I was a fool. For a while, everything seemed normal. The house was quieter without Mom and Dad, but Emma made sure I had food, clothes, and a roof over my head. She promised me we would get through it together. I clung to those words. Then, little things started changing. First, she stopped buying groceries. The fridge was empty more often than not, and I found myself eating ramen and toast for most meals. Then, she stopped giving me money for school supplies. When I asked, she just sighed and told me to figure it out. One night, I overheard a conversation she had with someone over the phone. "No, he's still here," she said, sounding annoyed. "Yeah, I know. But what am I supposed to do with him?" That was the first time I felt a pit in my stomach. Then, a week later, she brought a man home. His name was Ryan, and I hated him immediately. He looked at me like I was a stray dog that had wandered into his house. Emma stopped talking to me as much after that. She spent more and more time with Ryan, and less time making sure I had what I needed. And then, the day came. I came home from school, exhausted, only to find my things packed in garbage bags by the front door. My stomach dropped. Emma was sitting on the couch, Ryan beside her, a glass of wine in her hand. She didn't look sad. She didn't look guilty. She just looked indifferent. "You can't stay here anymore," she said simply. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. "That's not funny." She didn't laugh. "I'm serious, Jason. You need to leave." I looked at Ryan, then back at her. "Emma, this is my home." "No," she said coldly. "It's mine. Everything in this house is mine. And I don't want you here anymore." I could barely breathe. "Where am I supposed to go?" She shrugged. "Figure it out." I stood there, frozen, waiting for her to take it back. Waiting for her to tell me this was some kind of twisted test. But she just stared at me, her expression unreadable. And that's when I knew my sister, the person I trusted most in the world, had betrayed me. I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I just picked up my bags and walked out the door. The night was cold. I had nowhere to go. But I swore to myself I would survive. No matter what it took. The first night was the hardest. I sat on a cold bench in a park, hugging my bag close to my chest, trying to convince myself this wasn't real. Any minute now, Emma would come running, telling me it was all a mistake. Any second now, she would call my phone, begging me to come home. But my phone never rang. The reality hit me like a brick to the face. I was homeless. I barely slept that night. The sounds of the city, the cold, the fear of what might happen to me, all of it kept me awake. When the sun finally rose, I had a choice. I could sit there and feel sorry for myself, or I could figure out how to survive. I chose survival. The first struggles. I had about $40 in my wallet, money I'd saved from doing odd jobs for neighbors. I stretched it as far as I could, buying the cheapest food I could find, using public restrooms to wash up, and finding places where I wouldn't get kicked out for sleeping. For the first week, I bounced between parks, bus stations, and library corners, anywhere that would let me rest without asking too many questions. But the money ran out fast. I learned the hard way that people don't care about a 16-year-old kid with nowhere to go. Some gave me pitying looks, but no one offered help. The hunger became unbearable. I went 2 full days without eating, my stomach twisting in pain, my body weak. I hated Emma for what she had done to me. But more than that, I hated myself for believing in her. Finding work. I knew I needed a job. But who the hell hires a 16-year-old kid with no home address and no experience? The first place I tried was a small diner. The owner, an older man named George, took one look at me and sighed. "You ever worked a day in your life, kid?" he asked. "No," I admitted. "But I'll do anything." Something in my face must have convinced him because he tossed me a rag and pointed to a stack of dirty dishes. "You work, you eat. That's the deal." I worked my ass off that night. My hands ached from scrubbing, my back screamed from standing too long, but when George slid a plate of food in front of me at the end of my shift, I nearly cried. It was the first real meal I'd had in days. That one night turned into a regular thing. He couldn't pay me much, just a few bucks under the table and a free meal, but it was enough to keep me going. With that little bit of cash, I bought a second-hand backpack and a blanket from a thrift store. I found a better place to sleep, an abandoned construction site where no one bothered me. It wasn't much, but it was better than freezing on a park bench. School or survival? The hardest part was school. I didn't want to drop out, but how the hell was I supposed to sit in class, pretending to be a normal kid, when I had no home to go to at the end of the day? I tried to keep up. I showered at the school gym, borrowed books from the library, and did my homework under streetlights when I had to. But the exhaustion got to me. More than once, I fell asleep in class, my head hitting the desk before I even realized I was nodding off. Teachers started noticing. They asked if I was okay. I lied every time. I knew if I told them the truth, they'd call social services, and I'd end up in some foster home or worse. I wasn't going to let that happen. I just had to hold on until I turned 18. The first break. After months of struggling, things finally started to change. One night, a customer at the diner overheard me talking to George. He was a businessman, well-dressed, the kind of guy who looked like he had money. "You looking for extra work?" he asked me. "Always," I said. He handed me a card. "Come by this address tomorrow. I might have something for you." I showed up the next day, expecting some shady deal, but instead, I found myself at a warehouse. The man owned a shipping company and needed someone to do inventory. It wasn't much, just counting boxes and keeping records, but he paid me under the table, and it was more money than I'd ever made. With that job, I finally had enough to rent a tiny room in a rundown motel. It wasn't home, but it was a roof over my head. For the first time in a long time, I felt hope. The road to something bigger. I worked every job I could find, washing dishes, lifting boxes, even cleaning bathrooms if it paid. I didn't care what it was, as long as it got me closer to my goal. I saved every dollar I could. I studied at night, determined not to let my education slip. I refused to let Emma's betrayal define me. One day, I would have more than she ever took from me. One day, she would regret throwing me away. I swore it. 10 years. That's how long it had been since I walked out of Emma's house with nothing but a couple of garbage bags and a broken heart. Now, I own more than she could ever dream of. It started small, working every job I could find, saving every penny. But I wasn't just working to survive. I was learning. Watching. Studying the way businesses ran, the way money moved, the way the rich got richer while people like me got crushed under their feet. At 18, I got my GED. At 19, I invested my first real paycheck into a small online business flipping cheap electronics. By 22, I had started my first company, a logistics firm that took everything I had learned from working in warehouses and turned it into $1 million operation. Now, at 26, I was the CEO of a growing empire, with multiple businesses under my name, properties across the city, and more wealth than I had ever imagined. And then, one day, she walked back into my life. An unexpected visitor. I was in my office when my assistant buzzed in. "Sir, there's a woman here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent." I barely glanced up from my screen. I'm busy. Tell her to make an appointment. A pause. Then, in a quieter voice, my assistant added, she says her name is Emma Carter. I froze. Emma. I hadn't seen her since the day she kicked me out. She had never called. Never texted. Not even once. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the skyline through my office window, my mind racing. What the hell did she want? Face to face. I almost told my assistant to send her away. But curiosity got the better of me. Let her in, I said. A few minutes later, the door opened, and there she was. I barely recognized her. The confident, put-together woman I remembered was gone. In her place stood someone who looked tired. Worn out. Her clothes were nice, but not expensive. Her makeup was done, but it couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, she gave me a weak smile. Hey, Jason. I didn't return it. What do you want? She flinched, like she hadn't expected me to be so cold. Like we were long-lost siblings who had simply lost touch, not two people whose last conversation ended with her throwing me onto the street. She sighed and sat down across from me. I know it's been a long time. And I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything. But, she hesitated, her fingers tightening around her purse. I need your help. I almost laughed. She needed my help? For years, I had imagined this moment. I had pictured it 1,000 different ways. In some versions, I told her to go to hell. In others, I forgave her. But I had never truly believed she would come crawling back. And yet, here she was. Her story. I lost everything, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I leaned back, folding my arms. How? She swallowed hard. Bad investments. Ryan, she stopped, shaking her head. He wasn't who I thought he was. He spent everything. Took loans in my name. I didn't find out until it was too late. I remembered Ryan. The man she chose over me. The one who had sat beside her while she told me to leave. I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. So, what? I said, my tone emotionless. You lost the house? Your savings? She nodded. I tried to fix it, but the debts kept piling up. I had to sell everything. And now? I have nowhere else to go. I stared at her, my heart cold. She had nowhere to go. Just like I had nowhere to go when she threw me out. The plea. She met my eyes, and for the first time in years, she looked genuinely vulnerable. I know I don't deserve anything from you, she said, her voice breaking. I was horrible to you. I made the worst mistake of my life, and I regret it every single day. I should have protected you. I should have been there for you. But I can't change the past. She took a deep breath. I'm not asking for money. I need a job. A place to stay. Anything. I said nothing. She continued, desperation creeping into her voice. Please, Jason. I don't have anyone else. I studied her for a long moment. She wasn't lying. Emma had burned every bridge. And now, the little brother she abandoned was the only person left who could save her. Fate had a funny way of working things out. But the question was, what was I going to do? I let the silence drag on. Emma sat across from me, her hands clenched together, waiting, hoping that I would be the same little brother she had once known. The one who had loved her unconditionally. The one who would have done anything for her. But that boy had died the night she threw me out. I wasn't her little brother anymore. I was Jason Carter, CEO, millionaire, and the man who had built an empire from nothing. And now, the sister who had abandoned me was sitting in front of me, begging for scraps. A cruel part of me wanted to make her suffer. So I did. A test of loyalty. You need a job? I said finally, my voice calm, controlled. Emma nodded quickly. Yes. Anything. I'll do anything. I smiled, though there was no warmth in it. Fine. I have an opening in one of my warehouses. You'll start at minimum wage, working under a supervisor. No special treatment. No favors. She looked surprised, like she hadn't expected me to agree so easily. Thank you, she stammered. I really appreciate it. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto hers. Don't thank me yet. The job is hard. The hours are long. You'll be lifting boxes, working in the cold, taking orders from people who won't care who you used to be. Her face paled slightly. I could see the hesitation creeping in, the part of her that was still too proud to admit she had fallen this far. I tilted my head. Or, is that beneath you? Emma swallowed hard, shaking her head. No. I'll do it. I smirked. Good. You start tomorrow. She exhaled in relief, but she had no idea that this was just the beginning. Breaking her down. I made sure her first week was hell. Her supervisor, a no-nonsense woman named Lisa, had no idea Emma was my sister. I gave her one simple instruction: treat her like everyone else, no exceptions. And Lisa took that seriously. Emma worked 12-hour shifts, lifting heavy boxes, sweating through her clothes, and dealing with coworkers who saw her as nothing more than the new girl. I had access to the security cameras, so every night, I watched. I saw the exhaustion on her face. The way her body ached. The way she struggled to keep up. And I felt nothing. I let it go on for a month. Then, I decided to raise the stakes. A harsh lesson. One afternoon, I called Emma into my office. She walked in, looking completely drained, her once perfect posture now slumped, her hands rough and calloused from work. She looked small. I gestured to the chair across from me. Sit. She hesitated, then obeyed. I steepled my fingers, watching her carefully. How's the job? She swallowed. Hard. But I'm managing. I smiled coldly. Good. I have another opportunity for you. Her eyes lit up with hope, and for a second, I almost felt something. Almost. But then I remembered the night she threw me out. I leaned forward. I need a new housekeeper. It's better pay, fewer hours. You'd be working at my estate, cleaning, cooking, running errands. Interested? Her face turned red. You want me to be your maid? I raised an eyebrow. A moment ago, you said you'd do anything. Were you lying? She opened her mouth, then closed it. I could see the war inside her. The shame. The pride. The realization that she was truly at my mercy. And I reveled in it. Finally, she lowered her head. I'll take it. The final blow. For the next month, Emma worked for me. She cleaned my house. She served me coffee. She scrubbed the floors of the mansion I had earned while she had thrown away everything she was given. Every day, she had to look me in the eye and know that I was the one who held the power now. And I enjoyed it. I made small requests, nothing cruel, just enough to remind her of her place. Emma, can you bring me my coat? Emma, I need my car washed. Emma, make sure my schedule is cleared for tomorrow. Each time, she would hesitate just for a second. But she would obey. Because she had no choice. And then, one night, as I watched her clean the dining room table, I realized something. I didn't feel good about this anymore. For years, I had dreamed of revenge, of making her suffer the way she made me suffer. But now that she was broken, beaten down, nothing like the sister I once knew, I felt empty. This wasn't who I was. I had fought for everything I had. I had worked, clawed, and bled my way to the top. But this? This wasn't a victory. This was just cruelty. I wasn't punishing her. I was becoming her. And I refused to let that happen. The decision. The next morning, I called her into my office one last time. She walked in cautiously, as if expecting me to fire her. I looked at her for a long moment, then slid an envelope across the desk. "What's this?" she asked, frowning. "Your severance package," I said. "Inside is enough money for you to start over. Get an apartment. Find a real job." Her hands trembled as she picked up the envelope. "You're letting me go?" I nodded. "Yes." She swallowed, her eyes glistening. I don't understand. Why now?" I leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Because I wanted to see you suffer," I admitted. "And now that I have, I don't care anymore." She flinched, as if my words had physically struck her. I stood up, walking around the desk until I was standing directly in front of her. "Emma, I'm not the same kid you threw out onto the street. I survived. I thrived. I built something for myself, and I did it without you." I took a step closer, my voice firm. "And now, I'm done with you." Her breath hitched. "Jason, I held up a hand, cutting her off. "You made your choice 10 years ago. Now, I'm making mine." She blinked back tears, nodding slowly. I understand." I studied her face one last time, then turned away. "Take the money and leave, Emma. And don't come back." She stood there for a moment, as if hoping I would change my mind. But I didn't. Without another word, she turned and walked out of my office. I didn't watch her go. I had already moved on. I let the silence stretch between us, watching as Emma shifted uncomfortably in her seat. A part of me, the 16-year-old kid who had begged her not to throw him out, wanted to scream at her. Wanted to tell her to get out of my office and never come back. But another part of me, the part that had clawed his way to the top with nothing but sheer will, saw an opportunity. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk. "You need a job?" She nodded quickly, hope flashing in her eyes. "Yes. Anything. I'll do whatever it takes." I tapped my fingers on the desk, pretending to think. "You know," I said slowly, "I actually do have an open position." Her expression lit up. "Really?" I smiled. "Yeah. My company owns several hotels, and one of them has been struggling to keep staff. We could use someone like you." Her face filled with relief. "Oh my God, Jason, thank you. I swear, I won't let you down." I just smiled. She had no idea. Her new job. 2 days later, Emma reported for her first day of work. As a hotel maid. I made sure she was assigned to one of my busiest properties, a massive high-end hotel that catered to wealthy clients. The work was brutal. Cleaning rooms for 12 hours straight, scrubbing bathrooms, making beds, and dealing with entitled guests who saw her as nothing more than a servant. The first week, she looked exhausted. By the second week, she had blisters on her hands. Every day, she came to work, her pride slowly being chipped away. And I watched. I watched as the woman who once thought she was above me now scrubbed floors for a living. I watched as she swallowed her pride, forcing a smile for rude customers who barely acknowledged her existence. I watched as she finally understood what it felt like to be nothing. But I wasn't done yet. Pushing her limits. One day, I made a surprise visit to the hotel. Emma didn't see me right away, too busy carrying a heavy basket of towels through the lobby. When she finally noticed me, she stiffened, quickly straightening her uniform. "Jason," she said, forcing a smile. "I didn't know you'd be here." I shrugged. "Just checking in on things." I glanced at the pile of towels in her arms. "How's the job?" She hesitated. "It's hard. But I'm grateful." Grateful. The word made me almost laugh. She had no idea that this was her punishment. That every drop of sweat, every sore muscle, every humiliating task, it was all intentional. But I wasn't done. I turned to the hotel manager standing beside me. Emma's been here for a few weeks now, I said. I think it's time she got more responsibility. Emma perked up. Really? I smirked. Yeah. From now on, she'll be cleaning the VIP suites. Her face paled. The VIP suites were huge. Twice the size of normal rooms, with massive bathrooms, private hot tubs, and balconies overlooking the city. Cleaning one took hours. It was the most backbreaking job in the hotel. And it was hers. Breaking point. The next time I saw her, she looked like she was barely holding on. Her hair was a mess, her uniform stained with cleaning chemicals, and her hands were raw from constant scrubbing. Jason, she said quietly, barely able to meet my eyes. Can we talk? I gestured for her to sit. She hesitated, then slowly lowered herself into the chair across from me. She looked down at her hands, flexing her sore fingers. I don't know how much longer I can do this. I raised an eyebrow. You wanted a job. This is a job. She swallowed hard. I know. And I appreciate it. But, she hesitated. Is there any way I could do something else? Maybe an office job? Even something small? I stared at her. She had thrown me out like garbage, left me to starve, and now she had the nerve to ask for favors? I leaned back, my face emotionless. Emma, I said slowly, when you kicked me out of your house, did you care if I was tired? If I was struggling? Her face fell. Jason, that was different. No, I interrupted. It wasn't. Silence. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time, I saw real shame in her eyes. She swallowed. I just wanted to make things right. I let out a cold laugh. You don't get to decide that, Emma. You don't get to throw me away and then waltz back in when it's convenient for you. She looked like she might cry. But I didn't care. I had waited 10 years for this moment. She deserved every second of it. And yet, as I watched her sitting there, broken and defeated, something inside me shifted. Was this really what I wanted? A choice to make. I had spent years building myself up, waiting for the day I could get back at her. But now that the moment was here, it didn't feel as satisfying as I had imagined. I could keep making her suffer. Keep dragging her through the dirt, the way she had done to me. Or I could end this. I took a deep breath. I'll make you a deal, I said finally. She looked up, her eyes desperate. Anything. I folded my hands on the desk. You can keep working at the hotel. Or you can walk away and never contact me again. If you stay, you start from the bottom like everyone else, no special treatment. You earn your way up. If you leave, don't ever come back. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the edge of her chair. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, finally, she nodded. I'll stay, she whispered. I studied her face, searching for any sign of deception. But all I saw was a woman who had finally realized what it meant to lose everything. I nodded. Then we're done here. She stood up slowly, giving me one last look before walking toward the door. As she reached for the handle, she paused. Jason? I didn't respond. I know I can't undo what I did to you. And I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But for what it's worth, she swallowed hard. I'm sorry. Then, without another word, she walked out. I stared at the closed door for a long time. For years, I had dreamed of revenge. But for the first time, I wondered if this was enough. Weeks passed. Emma kept her head down and did her job. She didn't complain, didn't ask for favors, didn't try to speak to me again. She just worked. I kept tabs on her, not because I cared, but because I wanted to see if she would break. She didn't. She cleaned rooms, dealt with rude guests, and took every humiliating task given to her without protest. There were days when she looked like she was about to collapse, but she never quit. I had expected her to walk away. I had expected her to take the easy way out, the way she always had. But she didn't. And I hated that a small part of me was starting to respect her for it. A call I never expected. One evening, just as I was about to leave the office, my assistant poked her head in. "Sir, Emma Carter is here. She says she needs to speak with you." I sighed. "Let her in." A few moments later, Emma walked in. She looked different. She wasn't the broken woman who had begged me for help weeks ago. She stood straighter, and even though she still looked exhausted, there was a quiet strength in her eyes. She hesitated before speaking. "I'm leaving." I blinked. "What?" She took a deep breath. "I got a new job. Nothing big, just an office position at a small firm downtown. It doesn't pay much, but it's stable. I found a cheap apartment, too. It's not great, but it's mine." I leaned back in my chair, studying her. "So, you're quitting?" She nodded. "I just wanted to tell you in person. And to say, thank you." I frowned. "For what?" She swallowed. "For not giving me an easy way out. For making me face what I did." She paused. "I know I'll never make up for what I did to you. And I won't ask for your forgiveness, because I don't deserve it." Silence filled the room. For the first time in 10 years, she wasn't making excuses. She wasn't justifying what she did. She wasn't trying to fix things with words. She had changed. But was it enough? A crossroads. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the city. For years, I had thought that revenge would make me feel whole. That watching her struggle would erase the pain of what she did to me. But standing here now, I realized something. I didn't need revenge. I had one a long time ago. I built my own life. I built my own success. I proved to myself that I didn't need her, or anyone else, to survive. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. I turned back to her. "I don't hate you anymore, Emma," I said finally. Her breath hitched slightly, like she hadn't expected those words. "But I don't think we can ever be what we were," I continued. "Too much has happened." She nodded, swallowing hard. "I understand." I hesitated, then reached into my desk drawer, pulling out a check. I wrote a number down and slid it across the desk. She looked at it and immediately shook her head. "I don't want your money." "It's not charity," I said. "Consider it a loan. Pay me back whenever you can." She looked at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and took it. "Thank you," she whispered. I nodded. "Take care of yourself, Emma." She hesitated, like she wanted to say something more. But in the end, she just gave me a small, sad smile. And then she walked away. For the last time. Months passed. Emma was gone from my life, and for the first time in years, I felt lighter. I had spent so long chasing revenge, believing that making her suffer would somehow fix what she did to me. But in the end, it hadn't been about punishment, it had been about closure. And now, I finally had it. I threw myself back into my work, expanding my businesses, investing in new ventures. My empire grew, and so did my influence. But every now and then, I found myself thinking about Emma. Not in anger. Not in bitterness. Just wondering. A letter I didn't expect. One day, a letter arrived at my office. No return address. Just my name on the front in familiar handwriting. Emma's. I hesitated before opening it. "Jason. I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I wanted to say thank you. Not just for the loan, but for everything. For giving me a chance to stand on my own 2 feet. For making me face my mistakes. For being stronger than I ever was. I got a promotion at work. Nothing major, but it's a step forward. I've been saving up, and I'm slowly paying off my debts. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm in control of my own life. I know I can't undo the past. I know I can't change what I did to you. But I want you to know that I will spend the rest of my life trying to be a better person than the one who betrayed you. I won't reach out again, I know that door is closed. But I just wanted you to know. I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry I wasn't the sister you deserved. Take care of yourself. Emma. I sat there for a long time, staring at the letter. Not angry. Not hurt. Just at peace. Moving forward. I never wrote back. I never reached out. Not because I was bitter, but because I had let go. I had spent years defining myself by the past, by my pain, by the betrayal that had shaped me. But now, I realized that my life wasn't about Emma anymore. It was about me. So, I moved forward. Not as the boy who had been abandoned. Not as the man seeking revenge. But as someone who had survived, built something out of nothing, and come out stronger than he ever thought possible. And that, more than anything, was the best ending I could have asked for.